Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we will be talking about my favorite books of 2024. Last week, you should have seen my best media of the year, so I would recommend checking that out if you haven't already. It is like movies, TV shows, my favorite albums, podcasts, all of that fun stuff. But in this here video, we will just be talking about books. I have all of the different categories of books that I read, and I have a couple in each category that I want to talk about, some more than others, because I had a hard time deciding, especially on the romance category. But let's just jump right in and talk about some of my favorites. So we'll start with graphic novels. And I'll kind of talk about both of these in tandem because they're kind of long-standing series and I like them both for similar reasons. It is Lumberjanes and Giant Days. I believe these are from the same publisher. They kind of have similar feelings to them. Giant Days is about three women in college and their roommates, and it follows their journey through college and like falling in love and trying to like make money and figure out what they're going to do with their lives and all that fun stuff. And then Lumberjanes follows a group of like middle school aged girls and I think some into high school who are at a summer camp, and they discover that the summer camp has like some magical creatures and like magical things going on. I love both of these graphic novel series. I love stories about friendship in particular, and both of these series just feel like a warm hug. Obviously, Lumberjanes has a little bit more of like a magical element to it, but mostly it's just like following these characters as they're like going about their daily lives and like forming friendships and falling in love and like doing things together and like figuring out who they are, which is like common themes for both of these series, and they just feel so weirdly nostalgic and also like a comforting place to just fall into. I like the art styles for both. I will say neither of these had like the most satisfying conclusion. Like obviously they both end. One ends when they leave college, one ends like at the end of the summer camp. But the last like 4 to 5 volumes in each, the art style completely changes, and I don't like the art style for either of them when they change. And I didn't love, I just feel like they both were a little bit drawn out, but honestly, they're just so comforting to read that I like enjoyed my time with them. My favorite mystery, thriller / horror, I'm gonna loop them all together. First being The Midnight Feast. This is a mystery from Lucy Foley, who's one of my favorite mystery authors. This follows a group of people attending a like B&B on this island, and we're flashing between the present where a crime is slowly being revealed and the past where we're getting connections of all the characters. And I just think Lucy Foley just has a brain for mystery. She understands how to like weave together past and present timelines so well, and she just knows the connections between her characters so well and how to slowly feed the reader information and still like make it very exciting and fun. And I always just love every story that I read from her. Great mysteries, some of my favorites. And then my other pick is Our Wives Under the Sea. Now you could argue that this is more of a magical realism and less of a horror, but I would say there are a little bit of horror elements to it. It's essentially about two women, they're wives, they're married, and one is a marine biologist and she goes down for a dive. Something goes wrong on the dive, and when she comes back, she's not the same. We get her point of view on the dive, and we also get the wife's point of view of her wife being back and like acting weird, and how they met and how they fell in love and all of that. I would say the horror elements come from like the mystery and the suspense of like what actually happened on the dive, but majority of it is more like magical and more about their romance and like finding your way back to the people you love and like acceptance and life together. Like, what do you do when this person you love is no longer who they were before and they've changed and you don't really know what to do and how to get your relationship back to where it was? And the tenderness of being in love and sharing your life with someone. It's so good. The author does an incredible job of balancing the suspense with the like intimacy of marriage and marital issues, and the writing is spectacular. The length is perfect for the story that's being told, and the ending is just beautiful. My favorite nonfiction of the year, I read a lot of nonfiction, a lot about space and psychology. My favorite nonfiction of the year was definitely Unmasking Autism. I obviously got my autism diagnosis last year, and it's been life-changing. It's been very affirming, and I wanted to seek out some texts, some nonfiction about autism. And this one in particular talks about unmasking, which is the idea of changing who you are to fit neurotypical standards of behavior and society and all of that. It intersplices some research in with some real life experience from the author and other people that they interviewed. Overall, it's very affirming. I think it's a good way to dive into texts on autism. It's very accessible, and it's not scary and overwhelming, I think, like a lot of nonfiction can be. So I would recommend it if you're questioning, or you are maybe recently diagnosed and looking for some solace and some help with your identity and how to like be more fully yourself. I think it's a good one. Favorite fantasy and sci-fi picks. So these are fantasy sci-fi with no romance. I have a romantasy category that's completely separate. So my favorite fantasy / sci-fi, my first one up is the Monk and the Robot duology, sort of along the same lines of Lumberjanes and Giant Days. This is like a warm hug. It's about a monk who is trying to find their place in the world, their sense of identity, their purpose. They discover a sentient robot, and it's sort of like a dystopian, a little bit world where robots gain sentience and they isolated themselves from the human population. It's been like hundreds of years, and now they're trying to figure out like what the humans have been doing and how to like cohabitate again. And the monk is out on an adventure, and they meet the robot, and they have philosophical conversations, and they go around this area, this world together, and like have conversations with the people, and they have adventures together and conversations about like purpose and place and identity. And it's just very, very warm and comforting. It's conversations that I feel like a lot of people need to hear on productivity and mostly purpose. I would say like mostly purpose in life, and it's really, really well done. I would definitely say to read them as a duology, because I think the first one is good, but you really get the full story obviously once you read the second one. And then my other favorite is The Principle of Moments. This is a space opera, and it follows two characters from two separate timelines coming together to fight a big bad. It's a debut novel as far as I'm concerned, and it's tons of fun. It's very, very accessible sci-fi, which I feel like is important for anybody that's trying to get into the sci-fi genre. And it's a space opera, which means it's a little bit kooky and fun, and it's not as like serious as some sci-fi is, and it's very easy to fall into. It's quick, it's fast-paced. I liked the characters a ton, and I'm interested to see like where the storyline goes. All right, so let's talk about romantasy. The first one is When the Moon Hatched. I have the special edition right there. It is a fantasy romance. It follows a woman who starts off as an assassin for like a rebellion group because she like needs to make money to get by. She thinks her friend's been kidnapped, and so she like tries to find her and just gets involved in like the hero's plot and some other things going on in their world, like politically and all of that. It's a pretty long fantasy. I would say it's more fantasy than romance. There's a pretty slow burn romance. They don't interact too terribly much. It's definitely focused on the heroine's adventures and all of that. The world is incredible, truly, truly stunning. It's so obvious that the author put so much time into crafting the world and the lore behind her world and how the characters show up and like what this world looks like. And it's brilliantly done. It's not spoon-fed to the reader. The author believes that the author believes in the reader's intelligence and gives them as much information as they need and lets you be guided through the story. And it's very, very, very well done. The romance is swoony and the plot is incredible. I'm so excited to get more information about the world. I think I'm going to reread it pretty soon with the audiobook this time. I read it physically. I read it on Kindle the first time, and so I'm excited to like get back into the world and experience everything all over again. So very, very good. 5-star, 6-star, 10-star, incredible. I am so short of breath. I'm sick right now, so I'm struggling to like talk a ton, and I'm filming 2 videos back to back, so probably not my best plan while I'm sick, but here we are. Once Upon a Broken Heart, which is also on my shelves. This is a YA story, I think, as far as I know. It's YA. I would say the whole series as a whole is on my favorites. The first book was a 4-star, but the second and third one were 5 stars. This is a romantasy. It's following Evangeline. It's in the same world as Caraval. I didn't love Caraval. This follows Evangeline, who is in love with her childhood friend, and her stepsister is about to marry him. So she seeks out Jax, who is the fate of hearts, I believe, to stop their wedding. And she makes a deal with him that he will, like, call in 3 kisses of his own choosing at any time. And so they make this deal. She gets back to her world, and the whole wedding is frozen in stone. She reverses it and ends up getting frozen herself, and when she comes back 6 weeks later, everybody thinks she's a hero. Guy that she was in love with is like not there anymore. She finds out that they still tried to get married a second time and it failed, and so she's like heartbroken and all of that. She gets called up by the Viscountess and the Princess, who are the sisters from the Caraval series, and they say that they got an invitation to a neighboring kingdom's prince's birthday party where he's going to choose a wife, but they can't go, so they choose her as the emissary. She goes and tries to get the prince to fall in love with her, and it all goes awry. And obviously, like, there's a 3-book series, so it goes a little bit beyond that, but I really, really, really had a fun time with this series, first and foremost. The first time I read the first one, I gave it like a 3-star, and on the reread, it was just so much better. I love this world. It's so enchanting. It actually just reads like a fairy tale. I find Evangeline and Jax's characters individually so fascinating. Evangeline is like this eternal optimist who doesn't make the best decisions, but just wants to be positive about love and life and believe that she will have the very best and life is going to work out for her, and things just go wrong for her all the time. And Jax is a very interesting character. His character motivations are so fascinating to see unravel. In the beginning, he's this kind of irreverent trickster, and as you get to know him a little bit more and get some of his chapters, you see like the true character behind the facade, and their romance like made my chest hurt, which I know means that it was a good book. And I think the story is just so magical. It achieves that like fairy tale feeling so well, where you have this layer of glitz and glam and beauty, and then underneath is just this rotten core that I think is so good. And I am very satisfied with the way that it ended. Unpopular opinion, I know, but I'm excited to get more stories in the world, and it was stunning. And then lastly, my favorite romances of the year. I actually have 3 for this category instead of 2 because I couldn't decide. First up, we have Act Your Age, Eve Brown. I have read the first 2 romances in this series. This series follows 3 sisters, and this third one follows the youngest sister, Eve Brown. She's a little bit of a flighty character. She's known to pick up businesses and careers and then set them down when they don't work out for her. And in the beginning of the novel, her parents tell her that they're cutting her off from her trust fund. She needs to find a place to live, and she needs a stable job for at least a year before they will give her access to her trust fund back. And in a tizzy, she leaves the house, she drives off, and she goes to this like neighboring small town, and she sees a for like hiring sign on the hero's inn. It's like a bed and breakfast, and she applies for the position. The interview doesn't go terribly, but the hero, Jacob, I think is his name, just is not very, like, he doesn't think that she's professional enough. He thinks that she is a little bit too flighty, and so he, like, runs her off. But his friend convinces them that they really need the help. So he chases after her, and she runs him over with her car. And this sort of sparks their back and forth grumpy sunshine relationship, where Eve starts helping around the bed and breakfast. She becomes a cook for them, and they start sort of a grumpy, reluctant friendship into a romance. I was in love with this story from start to finish. The hero is autistic. He was diagnosed when he was a child, and he embraces every part of being autistic, which I love. Eve is exploring her own identity and her own relationship to autism. Her discovering she might be autistic was so intensely relatable. The experience was like almost exactly my own, and it was brilliant. And I loved reading a romance between 2 autistic people. I loved the conversations around showing up in a romance, in a relationship as an autistic person, and all of the issues that come along with being neurodivergent in a neurotypical world and society, with their expectations of how you show up and being able to be yourself, and kind of breaking the stigma and the stereotypes around being autistic. And I thought it was a beautiful romance. I loved it so much. It was intensely relatable, and it was gorgeous. I loved it. I was giggling and kicking my feet the whole time, and I really, really enjoyed it. Next is Chasing Cassandra. I think this is either the second to last or the last romance in the Ravenel series. I have really enjoyed my time with the Ravenels. Lisa Kleypas is one of my all-time favorite writers, especially historical romance writers. Her writing is just so dreamy and romantic. This is a romance that is very highly anticipated, between a character who is known to be a bit of a stoic businessman. He is kind of ruthless, and he's not someone that you like want to fuck around on. And the minute he sees Cassandra, who is the twin in the Ravenel family, he is absolutely smitten with her. He thinks she's stunning and witty and funny, and he is just completely gone for her on like page 4, and it's brilliant. It's my favorite type of hero, and at first it's definitely more of like this possessive feeling of like, I just want to own her, like not in like a gross way, but I just want to like be with her. I want to woo her. I want her by my side. I want to be able to touch her and love her and kiss her and all of that stuff. And it slowly becomes something more, becomes like actual love. Cassandra has always wanted like the stereotypical like wife life, like stay-at-home wife, children, all of that, whereas her twin sister, who already had her romance in the series, wanted more. She wanted to be an intellectual. She never wanted to be married. She's like very loud and out there, and she's the one that kind of gets all the attention, whereas Cassandra has always lived in her sister's shadow. And so seeing her have a romance with someone who was so enamored with her and so like open about just being obsessed with her was so delightful to see. And by the end of it, I just was like swooning for their relationship. I loved it so much. And then the last romance that I want to talk to you about is another historical. It's actually a very recent read for me, and it is The Devil is a Marquess. I listened to the audiobook version of this. It's my first Lisa Braden. I've tried to listen to another one of her romances, and I couldn't quite get into it, the audiobook version. I picked this up for the video where it's like people that also like The Highwayman. So I went in kind of expecting it to be a little bit emotional just based on The Highwayman itself being quite emotional, and it did not disappoint. This is about a woman who has been out in society for I think like 7 seasons. She never really anticipates that she's going to get married, but then her father sells her off to the hero, who is on a downward spiral. He's addicted to alcohol, he's gambling his life away, he has a terrible relationship with his family, and he recently inherited the title after the death of his father. And so part of the stipulation of him getting her dowry and getting her settlement from their marriage is that he will not drink for the first year of their marriage. And so they get married and they have to live together. They obviously don't really know each other. They don't much like each other. There's like an attraction, but they don't really know each other. But the hero is trying to overcome this addiction to alcohol that he has. And he's spent his whole adulthood trying to ruin his own life. He seemingly had no regard for his own well-being. He didn't really care if he lived or died. And with the heroine in his life demanding that he contribute to their marriage and run this business with her, run the estate with her, and show up in their marriage as a partner, he is forced to deal with all of the things that he's been repressing and deal with his addiction. And it's a gorgeous, gorgeous, emotional, heart-wrenching, heartwarming, beautiful romance. I loved seeing these two characters unpack their traumas and their baggage together and learning how to work together. This is like my favorite kind of arranged marriage. I find that with a lot of arranged marriage stories, we're just dealing with people who get married in the very beginning and then they're like stuck in the house and they're like occasionally banging or they're like hating each other. This is genuinely two people figuring out their place in the world and navigating their relationship and their partnership and what they want from the future together, and also like just going forward as individuals and working out how to live together and fall in love and how they're going to show up. And it's gorgeous. It's everything that I would want from a story like this, and it made my whole body ache, which is like 5-star feeling. I know that I have a good romance when that happens, and that's one of these stories for sure. So those are the best books of the year from all the categories that I read in the year. I would love to talk down below what your best books of the year are, or what you thought on any of mine. Consider subscribing if you want to see more content like this. Check out my backlist if you want more from me. All of my social medias are linked down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you guys in my next one.